In May of 1984 at the Monroe Institute, I had been training with Bob for almost 14 months, learning to control my out-of-body experiences. I had had spontaneous out-of-bodies for many years, and Bob had been training with me in his lab at the last year of my time at the project, Stargate project, to teach me to control my out-of-bodies. I wanted to see if controlled out-of-bodies were better at producing information, collection information, than remote viewing. It turns out you can do very specific things with out-of-bodies that you can't do with remote viewing, but I don't think it's as good. If you want to know how the trigger mechanism works on a Chinese nuclear weapon, out-of-body's better because you can go to the Chinese nuclear weapon and put your face in it, look around, do detailed drawing. But if you want to know where all the parts from the weapon came from, remote viewing's better because all the parts are intricately linked together data-wise. So things are different for how you want to do things. In any event, during that period, my training officer, Skip Atwater, would come in from the project and test me to see whether or not my remote viewing was getting any better. And one of his tests that he brought, one of the training tests that he brought, was a target that I didn't know anything about. Normally I did mundane targets like quasi-military targets. Well, this particular week he brought a Mars target. I didn't know it was a Mars target, but he gave a sealed envelope, neither did Bob Monroe. He gave a sealed envelope to Bob Monroe, which inside had a card that said Mars 1 million years BC. Bob thought it was another moon-day target as well. And he had a list of coordinates. So Bob had this card in his shirt pocket, and we had a list of coordinates as targets. And the first set of coordinates was 44.89 degrees, 9.55 degrees west. I didn't know anything about the targets as I was laying in a dark black cube in the lab, floating on a sea of salt, listening to hemisync tapes. And the first thing I heard was the coordinates. And this was my response. I got a great view of a pyramid form, sitting in a large depression. It's yellowish, ochre colored. I get clouds, a severe storm, major geological trauma. Then I was asked to visit the site before the trauma. They said, go back before the trauma. They said all the dirt had disappeared. There were now smooth walls. Everything was flat, megalithic. I said something about, gee, is this a new pyramid? Did they discover a new pyramid? Because it's really large. Shadow of people, fragments, memory of people. They said, go back to when they were there. Large people, thin and tall, wearing strange clothes, skin tight, very tight, almost can't see them. This is the actual target based on the coordinates. That's the face everybody's always referring to on Mars. This is actually the depressed area. This is the pyramid. It's actually a double-layered pyramid. This is the second set of coordinates that I got. In a canyon looking up steep, high walls that go on forever. Very intricate, huge sections of smooth stone carved out. Getting very large structures. Rabbit warren of huge corridors and rooms. I said the rooms were really large, and again I said something to him about this has got to be some new pyramids or something, because I don't remember ever seeing rooms this size in Giza or anywhere like that. That's a canyon, and that's the pyramid. Now what's really interesting about this particular pyramid, you notice it's sitting on the side of the impact crater. And that's a real trick, because that means the pyramid had to be put there after the impact crater. Because if the impact crater hit after the pyramid was there, it would have destroyed the pyramid. You can't have one and not the other. You understand what I'm saying? If that crater appeared after the pyramid, it would have destroyed that pyramid. The other interesting thing about this picture is you can measure the shadow of the crater, and based on the angle of the sun, you can estimate the size of the crater wall as being 3,000 meters tall. So that's a pretty deep crater. Now look at the shadow on the pyramid. Pretty tall pyramid. That's a 20,000 meter tall pyramid. Pretty big, huh? That's not the only thing interesting. That pyramid had to have been formed after the crater was formed. Here's something else interesting. That pyramid's even closer to the edge. And here's an even more interesting fact. There's the road in, there's the road out. I just find these really remarkable pictures. Here's another, this is a general area. Pyramid's huge, but different this time. The reason these were different is because they were a cluster. These are like shelters from storms. Designed for sleeping, I specified hibernation, sleeping through savage storms. I'm asked to find out why. They're an ancient people trying to survive. It's past their time and age. They're waiting for the return of someone sent to find a new home. Their world passed through the tail of a comet. I had a sense that their atmosphere was stripped away or destabilized when it passed through the tail of the comet. This is an old fort. Now what's interesting about the old fort, and it's something most people don't recognize, this is actually a pyramid. That's one side, that's the other side, that's the other side. The tip is missing off the top and it's hollow. I don't know if you can see that. Kind of interesting, isn't it? They call it the old fort. It's always referred to as the old fort. But that's a pyramid that's been tipped off. The tip's been taken off. That's a grouping of pyramids. And that's a building, or what's left of a building on a sort of a plateau. And that's the drawing I did of the larger beings. What I think in actuality, there really are no such thing as Martians. What I think Martians are is us. I think we're descendants of the original inhabitants of Mars. And we're the ones that never went back. Give you an idea of size, that's the rough size of the pyramid of Giza. Give you an idea of scale.